In the wake of the upcoming Amazon series The Rings of Power, we have more and more articles still coming out a few days before the premiere on September 2nd, and I'm going to go over two of them shortly. The first one is from Collider and is basically a interview with J.A. Bayona, one of the directors from the series, and the second is one by Screen Rant on one of the original characters, namely Isildur's sister. So the first one, I'm going to go shortly over it. It's of course one of those articles where the author says that they had high hopes when the director signed on to direct the first two episodes. But after watching the first two episodes, not only did he exceed my lofty expectations, but he also shattered the baseball like Roy Hobbs in The Natural. Yeah, that remains to be seen, of course, because at the moment only these outlets and some influencers or influential channels have seen the first two episodes, and of course they don't want to lose their access to these things in the future. So they say, of course, that the expectations are, better than expected, and all of this, which is, yeah, maybe they really think like that, but there's also a possibility that they just say that because they don't want to lose their access. And then it goes on to say one of the reasons I was so impressed with his directions is that he had to not only make you believe that you were back in Middle Earth, but he also had to introduce a number of new characters and make you care about them almost immediately. The problem with that is, of course, that there seem to be more original characters than um, original legacy characters, so to say. So you have here um, the cast list basically of the main characters, and in this list there are 12 original characters and only 9 characters that are actually described in the lore. And Sauron isn't listed because the actor isn't known yet. They want to keep that a secret to reveal later in the season, probably, as like, well, you didn't see this coming. So Sauron is left out. But if you count Sauron with it, there are only 10 main characters that are in the lore and 12 characters that are original characters. And I feel that this is problematic because there are far more characters than that in the appendices and the timelines and the main events that happen in the Second Age, and now you're just condensing the story, and it's probably only the end of the Second Age with everything bundled together in a quick series of events. Well, as I've said before in a previous video, these events take time over thousands of years, and it's far more interesting to see how they play out over time than having them all come together in one short episode of a few years, probably, or a few decades. So I think it's problematic. By the way, if you don't know who Kemen is, here lost in the list, this is Kemen. He's the son of our Pharazôn, or Pharazôn as they call him now, played by Tristan Gravel. And Pharazôn is basically reduced to just an ordinary counselor for the moment. So we're expected to see some family drama, as Kemen is also one of the original characters created for this show. So when asked what he was most excited about and what people wanted to see in The Rings of Power, yeah, he thinks that people will be excited about Middle Earth, and because he's such a fan of Tolkien books, he thinks all the values that you can find in those books are so needed nowadays. And that's really true, like values like friendship, hope, holding on to the good things in life, nature, those things are really important. Um, and they were really very well conveyed in the Peter Jackson trilogy for most of the time. And by changing the characters in The Rings of Power, changing characters like Galadriel, changing a character like Elrond, probably changing characters like Celebrimbor and Gilgalad as well. These values might be changed a bit as well, or applied to where needed or when they are needed. So let's hope they keep those values in because they truly are important nowadays. But it's also possible that they just put their own messaging in, which is really a messaging that is um, for this time and not really a universal story that might put viewers off as well. So of course they go on to making a prequel. Uh, well, Bayana thinks that, yeah, when he thinks about Peter Jackson movies, he loves and admires them and says that he was great in capturing Tolkien's spirit. So at the end, it's all about going to the source material and go to the books. So this is what I did. This bothers me the most because it's clear that he didn't go back to the books. You have only The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and the appendices to Return of the King to work with, and still, what you have, you change. Galadriel isn't involved in all those big battles, and you'll include her. She never went to Numenor, certainly not at the time when Miriel is queen in the series. She was never queen. Uh, Something I've also said before, she was meant to be the fourth queen of Numenor, but Ar-Pharazôn usurped the throne, married her against her will, and even changed her name. So at that time, Numenor was basically closed for the elves. They had relocated all the faithful to one city so they could keep control of them. And yeah, the elves never set foot in Numenor again because it sank at the end of the Second Age. So he says that he went back to the books and he read them again, and everything is in there. You can tell how cinematic Tolkien was. The way he portrays the landscape reflects the mood of the characters. That is the kind of style I love. So, if he says that, we're expected to see a lot of big landscape shots and not really a focus on the characters, which would be nicer, to be fair. I mean, we see it in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You see those big landscape shots with Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas running, and those are really majestic shots. Some of my favorite shots in the movie are basically those wide shots of the mountains and people running, and certainly those when the beacons between Minas Tirith and Rohan are lit. I mean, that's one of my favorite sequences. Just seeing those beacons being lit up in the mountains. So, yeah, maybe he loves the cinemacity of Tolkien in his books, but I mean, he definitely went back to the story, didn't go back to the source material and go through the books because it's clear that so much has been changed that is even too big to start listening up again. So let's go to the second article about Isildur's sister. This will be just even shorter actually. Isildur's sister Erin is played by Emma Horvath, and she basically says here that she thinks that the character was created because of the schism that happens on the island, and that this also needs to be reflected within the family. She serves a plot function in that sense. She also replaces a feminine role that's been left by the loss of her mother. At least she's trying her hardest this season to be as much of a mother as she can be to her very troubled brother. And yeah, I have to disagree with that completely. Um, because the schism on the island doesn't need to be reflected in the family at all. The schism is between the king's men and the faithful, and Elendil, as son of the last lord of Andunue, he is basically the leader of the faithful now, and all the faithful are basically relocated by the king's men in the city of Romana, the main eastern port of Numenor, where they can be controlled. So they're basically all in a ghetto, and that there would be some troubles within the family. Uh, an adolescent son versus a father figure. Yeah, sure, that could happen, but it's not something people want to see. You don't need to create a new character to fill that hole of a mother that isn't there. The story between a father and a son alone without a mother can be interesting as well. I mean, there doesn't need to be a mother figure to have a good story. Then it goes on a bit to say that the second age of Middle Earth lacks the more detailed source material available for the first and third ages because they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion, so they can't use it. And the Rings of Power's creative team are certainly making a huge gamble by introducing as many original characters as as they want. So back when Peter Jackson said about making the Hobbit trilogy, he experienced some measure of fan backlash regarding his controversial decision to introduce an entirely original character in the form of Evangeline, Lily's elven warrior Tauriel. Yeah, that was a really dumb choice. Um, Further increased by the fact that she had a romance with a dwarf, with Fili or Kili, one of the two. I mean, this original character was absolutely not necessary for the story. The romance was not necessary, so the criticism he received was justified, and the criticism uh, Amazon gets for introducing so many original characters and changing so much of the lore is also criticized because people don't want to see all those things. They want to see what's in the books, and if they could just keep to that, the show would probably be better received. And it would also help to not call your fans or the fans of Lord of the Rings racist and sexist because they say that some characters don't fit within the lore. So the last bit is that now it would seem that Amazon is going one step further by not only creating multiple new characters but also making direct changes to Isildur and the House of Elendil, one of the most important bloodlines in the original mythology. This is an incredible risky move given that many will certainly be watching the series closely, ready to jump on even the slightest perceived mistreatment of Tolkien's lore. Well, I won't say that everybody will be ready to jump on the slightest perceived mistreatment because in Peter Jackson's trilogy, you could argue that there are also perceived mistreatments of Tolkien lore because some characters are changed, some of the dialogues are shifted from one character to another character, but mainly to advance the story, not really because they can change it or they want to change it, but because it just fits better within the story. It gives some characters more screen time, it gives some characters more depth, so it's more done for the story and less for personal messaging or personal ideas to put into the show. So, hopefully, however, Amazon will find a way to seamlessly interweave their original characters with Tolkien's beloved creations and deliver a product that does the source material justice. Yeah, um, to be fair, when the first announcements were made, I was initially hopeful that it would be a good show because it's a really interesting time period, the Second Age. But of course, after seeing countless teasers and interviews and all these articles coming out, it's not looking good. And I hope that there will be some good moments in it. The music will be great, probably, composed by Bear McCreary and John Howard. John Howard, who worked on the original trilogy of Peter Jackson, and Bear McCreary, who worked on shows such as The Walking Dead. So, I mean, those are two really good composers, so at least the music will be great. So, that's all I have for today. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, and see you in the next one.